The Erebus 4 mining station hung like a tarnished jewel against the velvet backdrop of space, its lights flickering in the darkness. It was a place where humans knew their place, at the bottom of the food chain. In the vast expanse of the colonized galaxy, humans were classified as a prey species, their physical attributes deemed inferior to the more aggressive. Powerful races that dominated interstellar politics and commerce. Ilara Klein had lived with this reality her entire life. As a maintenance engineer on Erebus 4, she navigated the complex social hierarchy with practiced caution, keeping her head down and her ambitions modest. The station was under the control of the Dracor Empire, a species of towering, predatory humanoids known for their ruthlessness and disdain for what they considered lesser beings. "Maintenance request in Sector 7, chirped Ilara's comm unit, interrupting her thoughts as she tightened the last bolt on a coolant pipe. She wiped sweat from her brow, leaving a smudge of grease across her forehead. "Copy that," she replied, gathering her tools. The weight of her spanner was reassuring in her hand, one of the few comforts in her precarious existence. The maintenance tunnels of Erebus 4 were a labyrinth of pipes, cables, and narrow passages that few ventured into unless absolutely necessary. For Ilara, they were a second home, a place where she could work without the constant scrutiny of the Dracor overseers. As she navigated through the dimly lit corridors towards Sector 7, an unusual sound caught her attention. A low, guttural growl followed by a heavy thud. Ilara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. The sound came again, weaker this time, accompanied by a ragged breath. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Ilara followed the sound, her curiosity overriding her fear. Turning a corner, she stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. Sprawled on the metal grating of the tunnel floor was a Dracor warrior, his massive form barely fitting in the confined space. Standing at full height, he would tower over her at nearly 9 feet tall. His scaled skin, usually a vibrant bronze, had faded to a sickly ochre, and dark blood oozed from a gaping wound in his side. The Dracor's amber eyes, vertical pupils dilated with pain, locked onto hers. His lip curled back in a snarl, revealing rows of sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. Ilara had never been this close to a Dracor warrior before. Maintenance workers like her were kept far from the elite guards of the Empire. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, to flee from this apex predator who, even wounded, could tear her apart with minimal effort. Yet, something in his eyes, a flicker of desperation beyond the pain and anger, held her in place. "You're hurt," Ilara said, stating the obvious, her voice barely above a whisper. The Dracor responded with another growl, attempting to rise but collapsing back with a hiss of pain. The movement caused fresh blood to flow from his wound, and Ilara could see the injury was deep, possibly life-threatening without immediate attention. In that moment, Ilara made a decision that would alter the course of her life. Instead of retreating, she stepped forward, removing the scarf she wore around her neck, a luxury item, one of the few personal possessions she allowed herself. "Ah, I'm going to help you," she said, her voice steadier now. "Try not to eat me, okay?" The Dracor watched her with suspicion as she approached, his massive clawed hand flexing as if preparing to strike. Ilara moved slowly, telegraphing her actions as she knelt beside him. "Yito, this is going to hurt," she warned, then pressed her scarf against the wound, applying pressure to stem the bleeding. The Dracor roared, his back arching in pain, and for a terrifying moment, Ilara thought he would lash out, but he didn't. Instead, he remained still, his harsh breathing the only sound in the tunnel as she worked to bind the wound with her scarf. "My name is Ilara," she said, working quickly to secure the makeshift bandage. "I don't suppose you'd tell me yours." The Dracor's eyes remained fixed on her, but he made no attempt to communicate. Ilara hadn't expected him to. Dracor rarely deigned to speak directly to humans unless giving orders. "All right, Mr. Silent and Deadly," she continued, tying off the scarf. "That should hold for now, but you need proper medical attention. Can you stand?" To her surprise, the Dracor nodded, a barely perceptible movement that indicated understanding. With evident effort, he pushed himself up, using the wall for support, even hunched over in pain. He towered over Ilara, casting her in shadow. "There's an unused storage compartment not far from here," Ilara said, gesturing down the tunnel. "I can take you there, get some supplies. It's not ideal, but it's better than bleeding out in a maintenance shaft." The Dracor took a faltering step forward, then another, following Ilara's lead. His movement was labored, each step clearly causing him pain, but he pressed on with the determination characteristic of his species. Ilara led him through the less frequented sections of the tunnels, her mind racing. What she was doing was dangerous beyond measure. If discovered, she would face severe punishment, possibly even execution, for interfering with a Dracor warrior. Yet she couldn't bring herself to abandon him. The storage compartment was small and cluttered with obsolete equipment, but it offered privacy and, most importantly, a medical kit that Ilara had stashed there for emergencies. She helped the Dracor lower himself to the floor, then retrieved the kit. "I'm not a doctor," she warned, opening the case, "but I've patched up enough injuries to know the basics." The Dracor watched her with those intense amber eyes as she removed her now blood-soaked scarf and began cleaning the wound. It was deep, as she had feared, but appeared to have missed any vital organs. "You're lucky," she muttered, applying antiseptic. "A few inches to the left, and we wouldn't be having this one-sided conversation." The Dracor hissed as the antiseptic stung, but remained still, allowing Ilara to work. Using the rudimentary supplies in her kit, she stitched the wound as best she could, then applied a proper bandage. "That's all I can do for now," she said, sitting back on her heels. "You should rest. I'll bring food and water when I can." The Dracor reached out suddenly, his massive hand engulfing her wrist. Ilara tensed, preparing for pain, but his grip, while firm, wasn't painful. He held her gaze for a long moment, then released her, nodding once. "I'll take that as a thank you," Ilara said, gathering her supplies. "I'll be back when my shift ends." True to her word, Ilara returned hours later with food, water, and additional medical supplies she had managed to pilfer without raising suspicion. The Dracor was exactly where she had left him, though he appeared more alert, his color slightly improved. This pattern continued for days. Ilara would complete her maintenance duties, then sneak away to tend to the wounded Dracor. He never spoke, but as the days passed, his demeanor toward her softened. The initial suspicion in his eyes gave way to something else, a grudging respect, perhaps, or curiosity. It was on the 5th day that everything changed. Ilara arrived at the storage compartment to find the Dracor standing, testing his strength. The wound was healing remarkably fast, a testament to the superior regenerative abilities of his species. "You're looking better," Ilara observed, setting down her supplies. "I'm guessing you'll be rejoining your people soon." The Dracor turned to face her, and for the first time, he spoke. "Crothar." His voice was deep and resonant, with the distinctive rumbling quality of the Dracor language. "Excuse me?" Ilara asked, startled by the sudden communication. My name, he clarified, is Crothar. Crothar, Ilara repeated, testing the name. Well, Crothar, it's nice to finally hear your voice. Why did you help me? Crothar asked, his directness typical of his species. Ilara shrugged, uncomfortable under his intense gaze. You were hurt. I could help. It seemed like the right thing to do. Even though I am Dracor? Even though my people see yours as prey? Maybe especially because of that. Ilara admitted, not all humans are as weak as your people think. Crothar considered this, his head tilting slightly. No, he agreed. They are not. From that day forward, a strange bond began to form between them. Crothar did not return to his fellow Dracor as Ilara had expected. Instead, he began to follow her, at a distance at first, then more openly, as if appointing himself her guardian. The first time Ilara noticed his presence outside the maintenance tunnels, she nearly had a heart attack. She was exiting the mess hall when she spotted him, lurking in the shadows of the adjacent corridor, his amber eyes unmistakable. Oh, what are you doing? She hissed, approaching him as discreetly as possible. Someone will see you. I am watching, Crothar replied simply. Watching what? You... The answer sent a chill down Ilara's spine. Why? Crothar's expression was unreadable, his alien features giving little away. You saved my life, by the laws of my people. I am bound to you until the debt is repaid. Yes, that's ridiculous, Ilara protested. I don't need a Dracor bodyguard. What I need is for you to go back to whatever you were doing before you got stabbed in my maintenance tunnel. I cannot, Crothar stated firmly. The debt must be honored. Ilara opened her mouth to argue further, then closed it. Arguing with a Dracor was like arguing with a bulkhead, pointless and potentially hazardous to one's health. Fine, she conceded, but at least try to be less obvious about it. The last thing either of us needs is unwanted attention. Crothar nodded his agreement, and true to his word, he became less conspicuous in his vigilance. But he was always there, a shadow at the edge of Ilara's awareness, watching over her as she went about her duties. The true value of his protection became apparent 2 days later when Ilara found herself cornered by a trio of Zakari traders. The Zakari, reptilian creatures known for their aggressive business tactics and disdain for humans, had backed her into a secluded corridor after she had refused to grant them unauthorized access to a restricted section of the station. The little human thinks she has authority, hissed the lead Zakari, his forked tongue flicking out in amusement. Perhaps we should remind her of her place in the galactic order. Ilara stood her ground, though her heart raced. I'm just following protocol. If you have a problem with it, take it up with station security. The Zakari laughed, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Ilara's spine. We prefer to handle things directly. As the Zakari advanced, a shadow detached itself from the wall behind them. Crothar stepped into view, his massive form radiating menace. Step away from the human, he commanded, his voice a low growl that reverberated in the narrow space. The Zakari froze, their confidence evaporating at the sight of the Dracor warrior. Without another word, they retreated, their earlier bravado forgotten in the face of a true predator. Ilara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank you, she said, genuinely grateful for Crothar's intervention. Crothar inclined his head slightly. The debt remains. Word of the incident spread quickly through the station. A Dracor warrior protecting a human maintenance worker was unprecedented, and it drew attention that neither Ilara nor Crothar had wanted. Among the most interested was Vekor, the Dracor commander who oversaw the station's security forces. Vekor was old, even by Dracor standards. His bronze scales dulled with age, but his cunning remained sharp as ever. He summoned Crothar to his quarters, demanding an explanation for his unusual behavior. "You disgrace yourself and our people by associating with prey," Vekor accused, his voice dripping with contempt. "Explain yourself, warrior." Crothar stood at attention, his expression impassive. "The humans saved my life. I honor the blood debt, as our laws dictate." Vekor circled Crothar, his claws clicking on the metal floor. "A blood debt? To a human? Absurd. Whatever aid she provided, it does not warrant such devotion. You will cease this behavior immediately and return to your duties." "With respect, Commander," Crothar replied, his tone careful but firm. "The debt is mine to honor as I see fit. Our laws are clear on this matter." Vekor stopped, his amber eyes narrowing dangerously. "You dare cite our laws to me? I, who have served the Empire for centuries." "Very well. Crothar, honor your debt. But know this, your actions reflect on all Dracor. Should your behavior bring shame upon our people, the consequences will be severe for both you and your human pet." The warning was clear, but Crothar remained undeterred. If anything, Vekor's disapproval seemed to strengthen his resolve to protect Ilara. He became more vigilant, more present in her daily life. Though he maintained enough distance to avoid drawing further attention, Ilara, for her part, found herself growing accustomed to Crothar's presence. What had initially been disconcerting, having a 9-foot predator shadowing her movements, gradually became comforting. In a station dominated by species that viewed humans as inferior, having a Dracor guardian was a form of protection she had never expected, but now valued deeply. Their unlikely alliance did not go unnoticed by Ilara's fellow humans. Commander Delian, the highest-ranking human on Erebus IV, called her to his office after reports of her Dracor shadow reached him. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is?" Delian demanded. Pacing the small confines of his office, unlike the spacious quarters afforded to the Dracor leadership, human officers were given only the barest necessities. "Associating with a Dracor warrior? It's unheard of." "He saved me from these Akari," Ilara pointed out, standing at ease before Delian's desk. "And he hasn't harmed anyone." "Yet," Delian countered, running a hand through his graying hair. "These are predators, Ilara, their biology, their psychology. Everything about them is designed for dominance and violence. Whatever debt he thinks he owes you, it's temporary. Sooner or later, his true nature will assert itself." Ilara shook her head, surprising herself with her certainty. "You're wrong about him. Crothar is different." "Different?" Delian laughed without humor. "They're all the same. The sooner you accept that, the safer you'll be." He sighed, his expression softening slightly. "Look, I understand the appeal of having a Dracor protector, but trust me, nothing good can come of this. Distance yourself before it's too late." But Ilara couldn't distance herself, even if she had wanted to. Crothar had become a constant in her life, a presence that, against all odds, brought her comfort in the harsh reality of Erebus IV. Their unusual relationship continued to evolve over the following weeks. Crothar began accompanying Ilara more openly on her maintenance rounds, learning about the intricate systems that kept the station functioning. He showed a surprising interest in human technology, which, while considered primitive by Dracor standards, had a practicality and resourcefulness that he came to appreciate. In turn, Ilara learned about Dracor culture and traditions from Crothar. He told her of his homeworld, a place of towering mountains and vast plains where his people had evolved as the apex predators of their ecosystem. He spoke of the honor codes that govern Dracor society, the emphasis on strength and courage, but also on loyalty and debt. Our people have not always been enemies, Hrothar revealed one evening as they sat in a secluded observation deck, watching the stars. There was a time, centuries ago, when Dracor and humans worked together as allies. What happened? Elara asked, fascinated by this glimpse into a history she had never been taught. Hrothar's expression darkened. War. Betrayal. The details have been lost or deliberately obscured, but the result was the hierarchy we see today, with humans classified as a prey species, deemed suitable only for labor and service. And you don't agree with that classification? Hrothar was silent for a long moment, considering his answer. I believed it once, he admitted. It was what I was taught, what all Dracor are taught from hatching. But now, he looked at Elara, his amber eyes reflecting the starlight. Now, I am not so certain. This admission, simple as it was, represented a profound shift in thinking for a Dracor warrior. It was a testament to the bond that had formed between them, a bond that defied the rigid hierarchies of their galaxy. But their peaceful coexistence was not destined to last. Rumors had reached the higher echelons of the Dracor Empire about the warrior who had taken a human under his protection. Sensing a threat to the established order, the Empire dispatched a team of elite hunters to investigate, and if necessary, eliminate the source of this disruption. The hunters arrived without warning, their sleek vessel docking at Erebus IV under the pretext of a routine inspection, led by Sarex, a battle-scarred veteran known for his ruthless efficiency. They immediately began gathering information about Hrothar and his human companion. Elara was in the middle of repairing an environmental control unit when Hrothar appeared suddenly at her side, his expression grim. We must go, he said without preamble. Now. What? Why? I'm in the middle of… Hunters, Hrothar interrupted, the word filled with urgency. They have come for me. For us. The gravity of the situation hit Elara like a physical blow. Where can we go? This is a space station. There's nowhere to hide. The maintenance tunnels, Hrothar suggested. They are extensive, and few Dracor would willingly enter such confined spaces. It was their best option, perhaps their only option, gathering only the essentials. They retreated into the labyrinthine network of tunnels that Elara knew so well. Here, her knowledge gave them an advantage, allowing them to stay one step ahead of the hunters who began a methodical search of the station. For 3 days, they evaded capture, moving through the tunnels, never staying in one place for long. Elara's colleagues, sympathetic to her plight, provided what assistance they could, smuggling food and information to them when possible. It was through one such contact that they learned of a larger threat approaching Erebus IV. A Zakari battle fleet had been detected on the edge of the system, their intentions clear, to seize control of the valuable mining station while the Dracor were distracted by internal matters. We have to warn them, Elara insisted when she heard the news. Regardless of our situation, we can't let the station fall to the Zakari. Hrothar agreed, though he knew that revealing themselves would likely mean his capture and possible execution for defying the Empire's hierarchy. The welfare of the station and its inhabitants, both Dracor and human, took precedence over their personal safety. Using Elara's access codes, they sent a warning to both Commander Delian and Commander Vekor, including the Zakari fleet's projected arrival time and strength. Then, rather than continuing to hide, they made their way to the station's command center, prepared to offer their assistance in the coming battle. Their arrival caused a stir, with security personnel immediately moving to apprehend them, but Commander Vekor, having verified the accuracy of their warning, ordered his guards to stand down. "Your actions will be addressed," he told Crothar sternly. "But for now, we have a more pressing concern. The Zakari will be upon us within hours." Preparations for defense began immediately, though primarily a mining operation. Erebus IV was equipped with defensive capabilities, including shield generators and weapon emplacements. Crews were assigned, battle stations prepared, and evacuation protocols established for non-combat personnel. Crothar, despite his renegade status, was assigned to lead a defensive team, his combat skills too valuable to waste. Ilara, to her surprise, was not relegated to an evacuation ship, but instead assigned to the engineering team responsible for maintaining critical systems during the battle. As the Zakari fleet emerged from hyperspace, the tension on Erebus IV was palpable. The enemy vessels, sleek and predatory, arrayed themselves around the station, their weapons charged and ready. The first attack came without warning or demand for surrender, a barrage of energy weapons that tested the station's shields. The battle had begun, and with it, the true test of the bond between Ilara and Crothar. The initial hours of the conflict were chaos. The Zakari, determined to seize the station intact, focused their attacks on the shield generators and weapon emplacements, attempting to cripple Erebus IV's defenses without destroying its valuable infrastructure. Ilara worked feverishly in the engineering section, rerouting power, bypassing damaged systems, and keeping the station's defenses operational against increasingly dire odds. Crothar, meanwhile, led his team in repelling Zakari boarding parties that had managed to breach the outer defenses. They communicated when possible through the station's internal network, brief messages confirming they were still alive, still fighting. It was during one such exchange that Ilara received alarming news. The Zakari had targeted the station's core, planning to hold it hostage by threatening to overload the fusion reactors. "I'm going to the core," she informed Crothar. "They've breached the outer containment." "Too dangerous," came his immediate reply. "Wait for security teams." "There's no time," Ilara responded, already gathering her tools. "If they destabilize the core, the entire station is lost." Without waiting for his response, she cut the communication and headed for the reactor level. The corridors were in disarray, with emergency lighting casting eerie shadows and the distant sounds of combat echoing through the station. Ilara moved as quickly as she dared, using maintenance access ways to avoid areas of active fighting. The reactor level was ominously quiet when she arrived, the usual hum of machinery interrupted by sporadic alarms. Using her access code, she entered the main control room, only to find herself face to face with 3 Zakari technicians who were in the process of bypassing the reactor's safety protocols. "Step away from the controls," Ilara demanded, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. She was unarmed, outmatched, and alone. The Zakari turned as one, their reptilian features twisting in what might have been amusement. "A human," observed the lead technician, his voice a sibilant hiss. "How fortunate. We were just discussing the need for a hostage." Before Ilara could react, one of the Zakari lunged forward, grabbing her arm with a grip that threatened to crush bone. She struggled, but against the superior strength of the reptilian, it was futile. "Secure her," ordered the lead Zakari. "Then complete the override. Once we control the reactor, the Dracor will have no choice but to surrender the station." Ilara was bound and forced into a chair. Her attempts to reason with the Zakari met with indifference. They returned to their work, their scaled fingers moving over the control panels with practiced efficiency. You don't understand what you're doing, Ilara warned, watching in horror as they bypassed critical safety features. These reactors aren't like the ones you're used to. The containment fields are calibrated differently. If you override them all at once, you'll trigger a cascade failure. The lead Zakari paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. Explain. The Dracor modified these reactors, Ilara continued, seizing the opening. They added redundant systems that will interpret your override as an attack. The reactors will shut down completely rather than submit to external control. It was a lie, but a convincing one, based on enough technical jargon to give the Zakari pause. The lead technician approached Ilara, studying her with cold, calculating eyes. If what you say is true, how would one bypass these redundant systems? You'd need to do it gradually, Ilara replied, thinking rapidly. One subsystem at a time, maintaining the appearance of normal operations. I could show you. The Zakari considered this, clearly weighing the risk of trusting a human against the possibility that she was telling the truth, before he could decide. The door to the control room exploded inward in a shower of metal and sparks. Crothar stood in the doorway, his massive form silhouetted against the flames, his amber eyes blazing with fury. Behind him lay the bodies of Zakari guards, evidence of the path he had cut to reach Ilara. What followed was a blur of violence so swift and terrible that Ilara could later recall only fragments. Crothar, moving with inhuman speed, his claws flashing in the emergency lighting, the screams of the Zakari as they fell, the warm spatter of blood across her face as Crothar tore through her captors. When it was over, Crothar stood amidst the carnage, his chest heaving with exertion, his scales slick with the green blood of the Zakari. He turned to Ilara, and for a moment, she saw something wild and ancient in his eyes, a glimpse of the predator that lurked beneath the veneer of civilization. Then the moment passed, and he was moving toward her, his claws gentle as he freed her from her bonds. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Ilara shook her head, still processing the violence she had witnessed. "I'm fine, but the reactor, they were trying to override the controls." Together, they worked to restore the reactor's normal operations. Ilara's technical knowledge complemented by Crothar's strength and speed. Once the immediate danger had passed, they made their way back toward the command center, where the overall battle was being coordinated. The corridors were less chaotic now, an indication that the tide of battle had turned in favor of the station's defenders. When they reached the command center, they found Commander Vekor directing the final phases of the defense, his expression grim but satisfied. "The Zakari are retreating," he informed them without preamble. "Their boarding parties have been repelled, and their fleet has suffered significant damage. We have won the day." It should have been the moment of triumph, but Ilara knew that with the immediate threat resolved, attention would turn once again to the matter of Crothar's defiance and their forbidden alliance. As if reading her thoughts, Vekor turned his full attention to them, his ancient eyes unreadable. "You two have caused me considerable trouble," he said at last. "A Dracor warrior protecting a human engineer. It defies all convention, all hierarchy. By our laws, Crothar should be executed for such a transgression." Crothar stepped forward, placing himself between Ilara and Vekor. "If that is your judgment, Commander, I accept it. But know that I do not regret my actions. The debt I owed Ilara Klein has been repaid many times over, yet I would choose to stand by her side even without that obligation." Vekor's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. "And what of you, human?" he asked, addressing Elara directly, a rare acknowledgement of her status as more than a subordinate. Would you also choose to stand by a Dracor, knowing the cost? Elara met his gaze without flinching. I would. Crothar has shown me that there is more to strength than physical power, more to honor than following convention. If that defies your hierarchy, then perhaps your hierarchy needs to be reconsidered. A murmur ran through the command center at her bold statement. Humans did not speak to Dracor commanders in such a manner. Yet Elara stood her ground, her chin raised in defiance. For a long moment, Vekor was silent, his ancient face giving nothing away. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the command center. Perhaps, he conceded, there is some wisdom in what you say. Human, our hierarchy has served us well for centuries, but even the oldest structures must sometimes be examined anew. He turned to Crothar. You defied convention to honor a debt. In doing so, you embodied the highest principles of our people, loyalty, courage, and the protection of those under your care. These are values worth preserving, even if they lead us down unexpected paths. Vekor straightened, his decision made. There will be no execution. Instead, I will report to the Empire that the actions of Crothar and Elara Klein were instrumental in saving Erebus IV from Zakari control, and I will recommend that we re-examine our classification of humans as a prey species. Perhaps there is more to them than we have acknowledged. It was not a complete victory. Centuries of prejudice and hierarchy could not be undone in a day, but it was a beginning. A crack in the rigid system that had defined relations between their species for generations. In the days that followed, as Erebus IV began the process of recovery and repair, Elara and Crothar found themselves in an unprecedented position, neither fully accepted nor openly rejected. They existed in a liminal space between the established categories of their society. Commander Delian, initially skeptical of their alliance, became an unexpected ally, seeing in their relationship the potential for a new kind of cooperation between humans and Dracor. You've started something here, he told Elara as they surveyed the repairs to the environmental control systems. Something that could change everything, or nothing at all. It depends on what you do next. What they did next was to continue as they had begun, working together, protecting each other, demonstrating through their actions rather than words that the old hierarchies were not immutable. Crothar, no longer bound by a blood debt but by choice, remained Elara's guardian and companion. He taught her the combat techniques of his people, enhancing her ability to defend herself in a galaxy that still largely viewed humans as prey. In return, she showed him the ingenuity and adaptability that had allowed humanity to survive and thrive despite their physical limitations. Their example inspired others on Erebus IV. Slowly, cautiously, other Dracor began to interact with humans beyond the strict confines of the hierarchy. Humans, in turn, began to view the Dracor not merely as oppressors to be feared, but as potential allies who could be reasoned with, worked with, perhaps even befriended. It was a fragile beginning, a tentative exploration of possibilities that had long been considered impossible. There were setbacks, instances of prejudice, of fear, of the old patterns reasserting themselves. But there was also progress, small steps toward a future where the categories of predator and prey might give way to something more nuanced, more equal. 6 months after the Zakari attack, Elara found herself once again on the observation deck, watching the stars with Crothar at her side. She wore a new scarf around her neck, similar to the one she had used to bind his wound all those months ago. The original had been too damaged to salvage, soaked with his blood and later torn in their flight from the hunters. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Choosing to honor the debt, it changed everything for you." Hrothar considered the question, his amber eyes reflecting the distant stars. "There is a saying among my people, the path of honor is seldom the path of ease. I do not regret choosing honor, even when it led me away from all that was familiar." He turned to look at her, his expression softening in a way that would have been unthinkable for a Drakor warrior before their meeting. "And you? Do you regret stopping to help a wounded predator in a maintenance tunnel?" Elara smiled, reaching up to touch the scarf at her neck. "Not for a moment. Some choices define us, shape who we become. Helping you was one of those choices for me." Hrothar nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They had both been transformed by their unlikely alliance, changed in ways neither could have anticipated. The galaxy around them remained largely as it had been, hierarchical, often brutal, defined by the categories of predator and prey. But they had proven that those categories were not absolute, that individuals could choose a different path. As they stood together, watching the stars, Elara's scarf caught a draft from the ventilation system, fluttering like a banner between them, a simple piece of fabric that had once bound a wound and now symbolized a bond that defied the natural order of their universe. It was a small thing, perhaps, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, but it was their thing, a testament to the power of compassion in a world of predators and prey. And for Elara and Hrothar, it was enough.